Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the what if.
Chapter 46 Moonflower. How does it feel, Kushina-chan? He worded sensually, turning her on even more as her body began to shake from the uncontrollable hormones. It's wonderful, she spoke through the link while he continued to rub her. Should I stop now? They might catch us, you know. He suddenly spoke as the blonde began to pull his hand back when her soft hand held it, pulling him back in. And no, keep doing it. Kushina muttered in the link with a scarlet blush on her face, her breathing heavy while Naruto inwardly grinned, currently eating ramen with his left hand holding the chopsticks. Meanwhile, Ayumi had a proud smile on her face as she watched Naruto seduce Kushina like that. Whenever her blonde lover was free, she would give him lessons about what she dubbed as sex and seduction. And here was her Naruto, pulling it off like a pro. Ayumi, however, smiled while shaking her head as she saw Naruto glance at Kushina, herself seeing the female Uzumaki's tomato face as the whiskered blonde continued to rub her insides. Oh Kushina, you're still so naive, so innocent. But don't worry, my pupil will teach you. A few minutes later. Konoha's streets. Midnight. Look Naru-kun, the moon is full today. Kushina pointed out with a bright smile, currently walking beside her lover. The blonde lifted his head to gaze at the glowing heavenly body, a small serene smile tugging his lips. The duo were currently walking through the secluded streets with Kushina holding on to his right arm tightly, her head resting on his shoulder. It's beautiful, isn't it? She asked with a contented sigh escaping her lips. Naruto averted his eyes to stare at her, an amused smile stretching his lips. Leaning in towards her red hair, he sniffed in the heavenly scent, whispering in her ear sensually. Not as beautiful as a certain someone. This made the redhead jerk her head in surprise, a light blush spreading across her cheeks as she lowered her head, his hot breath sending shivers down her spine. B. Baka, her timid voice barely above a whisper, smiling at the compliment when Naruto untangled his arm from hers before wrapping it around her shoulder. Kushina closed her eyes as she leaned into his chest, a dreamy smile on her face as the duo continued to walk through the streets at leisurely pace. So, how's the workload with you being Hokage and all? The whiskered blonde asked in a somewhat lazy voice, making her hum in response. It's okay. It can be a little stressful, but I just let my shadow clones handle all the paperwork, her soft voice like a melody to him as she snuggled into his chest. Naruto suddenly gained a mischievous glint in his eyes as he grinned slightly. Kushina squealed lightly in surprise when she felt herself being picked up by the blonde bridal style. There, much better, he exclaimed with his foxy grin, making her smile back at him as she nuzzled her cheek into his chest, enjoying the warmth his body was exuding. Naru-kun. Kushina spoke, her voice unusually timid, making him lower his head. Yeah, how are you feeling? She asked softly, gazing into his oceanic orbs as she cupped his cheek, her maternal instincts surfacing. Naruto, however, instantly knew what she was talking about. He gave her a warm smile, his eyes pouring out his love and appreciation for her caring for his well-being so much. I'm fine, Ka-san. You don't have to worry, I can handle myself. I'm not a kid anymore after all, he grinned playfully at the last part, making her smile at him. Still, you will always be my sweet baby, she muttered to herself, tracing her fingers over his whiskers. And your lover too, Kushina-chan, he mumbled back, staring forward with a smile, making her eyes widen in surprise that he had heard her. Ka-san, should we tell the villagers about our relationship? He asked in a sudden serious tone, making her sigh. I don't think we should just tell them that we are seeing each other, and that's it. They will understand, seeing as we two are the last of the Uzumaki clan, Kushina answered, making him nod with a smile. Well, at least one part of their relationship they wouldn't have to hide. Which means the fact that you married too-san has to stay hidden, right? The Jinchuriki asked, making her nod, her face gaining a small frown at the mention of Minato. I heard from Jiraiya about you facing off against an Akatsuki member Deidara all by yourself, she started after an awkward silence, making him nod with a smile. Yeah, but it was a really tough battle. You wouldn't believe me if I tell you as to how I managed to pull out a draw, Naruto muttered with mirth in his voice while Ayumi chuckled at the memory. Kushina tilted her head cutely, a curious expression on her face. How? Well, let's just say that you should really declare Oroik no Jutsu as an S rank 1. The grin on his face couldn't have been wider while Kushina, eyes widened to the size of dinner plates in mind-boggling surprise. Oh, don't tell Medbane, she whispered in wonder, making him nod with his patented foxy grin. Why, you actually had the guts to pull it off in a life-threatening situation. The Godime Hokage was shocked at her lover's guts, or his another attempt to look like an idiot. Naruto, however, scratched the back of his head in embarrassment while Ayumi was grinning proudly since it was her idea in the first place. Hey. Well, let's just say that my mind wasn't exactly in the best of shape, the blonde muttered with a light chuckle. Hey. He somewhat flinched at Ayumi's cry. Ayumi-chan. I was only joking, Naruto muttered inwardly, making her HMPH. You're so ungrateful. I'm not gonna talk to you, she exclaimed before cutting the link, making him sweat drop. What the hell? I was only joking, he thought before noticing Kushina staring at his face with a loving smile. Something on my face, Kushi-chan? Naruto asked with a smirk, making her shake her head lightly, a small blush adorning her smooth cheeks. Ah, here we are, he spoke, now looking at their apartment which they had bought a month ago. Walking up the outer stairs leading to the balcony, he formed a Sealess shadow clone. The clone put his hand on the wooden polished door, channeling some chakra through the it. Kushina just stared at him with a smile, her arm wrapped around his neck loosely as a click was heard from the other side. Nodding slightly to himself, the clone turned the knob, opening the door before dispelling himself. Home sweet home, he exclaimed excitedly in a low tone, now entering the apartment while Kushina giggled fondly at him. Walking slowly through the short corridor, the duo entered the spacious living hall. Kushina, however, was surprised upon finding his eyes blood red with black slits. He must be using Ayumi's chakra to see through the darkness, she mused, the moonlight entering through the windows which was dimly lighting the room, giving her a sense of peacefulness. Ah, man, all that ramen really hit the spot. I'm feeling lazy, Naruto spoke as he plopped down on the couch with a jerk, Kushina still in his arms as she laughed lightly. Wow. Never thought I'd see Uzumaki Naruto acting lazy, she muttered, making him chuckle. What can he say? His mother just has that effect on him. He doesn't need to be on his guard when he's around her, the blonde uttered, his eyes closed with his head tilting backwards, being supported by the couch's top edge. Kushina smiled warmly as she raised her hand to cup his cheek softly. I thought I'd lost you, she mumbled as his eyes snapped open, the moonlight illuminating her face, giving it a heavenly glow. Naruto lowered his head to gaze into her eyes, which were getting glossy now. Holding her tight, he got off the sofa, struggling a bit before entering the bedroom. Kushina continued to gaze at him as Naruto gently placed her on the bed. Not saying anything, he laid on her before hugging her form, his nose nuzzled into her neck while Kushina blushed lightly, her sensitive and voluptuous assets pressed flush against his muscled torso. I will never leave you. That's the promise of a lifetime, he mumbled, making her smile as she rubbed his scalp tenderly, her eyelids getting wet. I'm sorry that I worried you, but He paused, taking a deep breath while Kushina listened to him intently. It's just that I never expected for something like this to happen. I really looked up to him. He was the big brother I always wanted. His voice held so much sadness while Kushina continued to rub his scalp softly as she wrapped her legs around his, providing him as much comfort as she could. I thought he was the only one who truly understood my pain. And then, all of a sudden, it was like I was forced to wake up from a dream. Just like that. He comes and says that he was under control, and all of a sudden I'm expected to just get over it like it's nothing. He paused, holding her tightly while Kushina held a soft look in her violet orbs, a look of compassion and understanding. Nar. I used to do that. When the villagers beat me, when they glared at me, when they ignored me, I just got over it quickly and did not think much about it. I always motivated myself, that someday I'll prove all of them wrong. I just grinned on the outside, I pranked without a care in the world, and I put a fake smile for the world to see. But this time, I couldn't. I tried to get over it, I tried to just laugh it away, but I couldn't. It kept eating me from the inside. Kushina kept on listening to him intently, not daring to interrupt him as Naruto inhaled her scent, nuzzling his nose in her neck, his eyes closed. I guess I finally understand Sasuke's pain, the blonde spoke while her eyes opened in surprise. Though not to his extent, but I now know the pain of your bonds being severed in an instant. It really is unbearable. I now know how Makoto-chan must be feeling. I now know how it must have affected Kurenai-chan when she lost her father during Ayumi's attack all those years ago. I now know how Anko-chan must have felt to have her father figure like Orochimaru betray her, throwing her like some garbage in an instant. I now know how Orochimaru must have felt when he lost his parents. I now know. Why Ero Sennin could never understand his teammates' pain, it was because he is an orphan, just like I was. I can say that I understand Orochimaru and Sasuke at some level, Naruto uttered, releasing a shaky breath into Kushina's neck. I know how it feels too. After all, I almost lost you 12 years ago, Naru-kun, the redhead thought, clutching him tightly to her. Naruto smiled lightly as he lifted his head to stare into her eyes, which were reflecting warmth and love. But you know what, Ka-san, I'll show them, he spoke resolutely, his orbs filled with determination while Kushina tilted her head lightly in confusion. Show them what? I'll show them that pain of your bonds being destroyed can be overcome by love. I have all of you, my friends. I finally have other people who care for me. I have you, Ka-san, right? He chuckled lightly, making her smile as she kissed him on the forehead, her lips lingering on his skin. Of course, sweetie. I'll be always there for you, no matter what, she uttered softly as he grinned lightly. We'll always be there for each other, no matter what. Promise? He asked, his grin fading to a playful smirk as the blonde held up his pinky. Kushina giggled at his antics as she wrapped her own finger around his, nodding at him with a smile. Yup, it's a promise, she whispered, cool night breeze coming through the window as it circulated in the room, much to their comfort. Naruto's smile, however, instantly vanished when he realized something. Oh, I almost forgot. He exclaimed in a low voice. Just as Kushina was about to ask, her eyes widened in surprise when the blonde pressed his lips to her gently. She slowly closed her eyes, kissing him back as the redhead melted into the kiss. Naruto was cupping her cheeks tenderly as she rubbed his scalp with her nimble fingers, she knew he loved it every time. Leaning back, he opened his eyes while Kushina still had her eyes closed as she licked her lips, savoring the kiss. This was their first kiss in a whole week, it felt as if years had passed. I just can't resist it. I can never have enough of him, she pondered, slowly opening her eyes as she again started to lean in, parting her pink supple lips. Her eyes were half-lidded, barely open as her lower lip quivered in hunger, wanting to taste those lips she was addicted to. Kushina, however, was surprised when she felt a finger pressed gently against her lips as she opened her eyes to see Naruto smiling at her warmly. Wait, I want to, he trailed, breathing in deeply as he resisted the urge to smash his lips against hers, now watching that irresistible expression of hers, the desire and need in her eyes, her soft and velvety lips, her hot breath, it was turning him on like crazy. Control yourself, Naruto. Control yourself. I have to tell her right now. Damn, she's so irresistible. Her pink lips are so soft. Kuso, releasing a shuddering breath, his eyes closed, the blonde was about to speak when his breathing hitched in his throat. Kushina ran her tongue over his finger, her right hand gently holding his wrist while her hot breath tickled the wet skin of his index digit. Trying to ignore the erotic sight of her slowly licking his finger, he continued. Kushi. Nah. Hey wait. Listen, but she won't budge. The redhead ignored his weak calls as she took in the tip of his index finger in her mouth, wrapping her soft tongue around it as she sucked on it gently. Naruto found himself losing control at the erotic display as he took deep breaths, trying to ignore her soft moans and the slurping noises. He could bet she was doing this on purpose. Oh my Kami. I never knew Kushina could be this erotic. She's seducing my Foxy-kun like a pro. Ayumi thought in shock as she watched Kushina's lustful expression through Naruto, not believing her eyes. This never happened with Minato. She was never the one to be so naughty, and look at her now, craving him like that. Oh Kushina, I'm so proud of you. Both of you are on the right track. The female Biju thought in glee, herself getting turned on by Naruto's groans. Hey, stop. Let me speak first. Naruto tried in vain, but under her skillful tongue, the blonde found himself helpless as he groaned lightly. Oh, Nha. Rusho. Kushina moaned, her lower regions dripping with her love juice as she suckled hungrily on his finger. His groans were a melodic aphrodisiac to her, his weakening resolve pushing her on as she wrapped her legs around his lower frame, locking him in. "Oh, Kushina," he whispered huskily as she continued to moan erotically. Gently pulling his finger away from her lips, he watched her in mild amusement as she reluctantly let it go. She opened her eyes, hazy violet meeting oceanic blue as they stared at each other. Not anymore. I can't wait anymore. Naruto," she whispered sensually, her lower lip trembling slightly in need as she rubbed her thighs together, her perky nipples poking her kimono while her skin was burning hot with desire. Leaning in towards her, Naruto gazed back at her with a small smile as he grazed her cheek lightly with the back of his hand. Kushina's skin tingled with pleasure as she shivered in anticipation. "Naughty Ka-san, seducing her son like that," he whispered, his lips just an inch away from hers as she blushed slightly, getting more turned on by the statement. Don't say so." Naruto didn't let her finish as he suddenly took her lips in a wild kiss. Kushina immediately began kissing him back feverishly, her lips mashing into his as they kissed wildly, hungrily, both of them moaning and groaning in pleasure. She wrapped her arms around his head, clutching his spiky locks as she pulled him closer. The red head arched her back, pushing her voluptuous breasts into his chest, grinding them against his muscled torso as sparks of pleasure traveled through her hardened nipples. Both of them could feel the heat radiating off their lips, the warm wetness, the velvety skin as they tried to melt their lips into each other. Their eyes were closed, her hands traveling up and down his body while both of them moaned and groaned in need, further increasing the heat. Naruto was surprised when she opened her lips first, her tongue coming out like a starving prey as she began to fervently lick his lips in between their kiss. He groaned throatily when she started to nibble on his lower lip, sucking on it furiously as his eyes threatened to roll back into his head. "Oh Kami. Ka-san. Such passion. Such wildness, it was driving him crazy." He opened his lips and not a second later, her tongue attacked his insides without any restraints, exploring every warm inch of his cavern as the blonde groaned in pleasure. "Fuck. So hot." Ayumi, not so surprisingly, was blown back with a nosebleed in his mindscape. Kushina's hands were sifting through his blonde locks as she grinded her body against him. Pulling his tongue out with hers, their soft appendages dueled with each other hungrily. Ha. Ha. Their warm saliva dripped down their tongues as the duo continued to make out, their tongues exposed to open air. Grinding her body against his, Kushina moaned into the kiss when his hardened member rubbed against her pelvis, a specific extremely sensitive part. This gave the blonde a chance to push back her tongue as he invaded her mouth, tasting her insides insatiably while Kushina tightened her arms around his neck, pulling him as close to her as possible. Warm streams of saliva dripped down their chin in this wet makeout session, showing each other as to how dearly they had missed each other during the last week. "Oh Naruto," Kushina thought fondly as she traced her fingers over his scalp, her heart beating wildly due to her desire as well as the impeccable joy of having him in her arms. The wild and heated makeout session soon turned into a slow, sensual, loving and a chaste kiss as they just traced their hands around each other's bodies. Finally running out of oxygen, even with their enhanced lung capacities due to being shinobi, Naruto leaned back ever so slowly. Both of them were panting now, their lower lips still touching along with their noses touched while their eyes were half-lidded. Naruto's hands found hers as they intertwined their fingers. "I love you," he panted as her swollen lips curled upwards. "I'll love. You too," she whispered, pecking him lightly while her long red hair were sprawled on the bed beneath her. Lifting his hand, he wiped the thin trail of saliva from her chin via the sleeve of his shirt. Kushina smiled at the gesture as she too wiped his chin with the sleeve of her kimono. You smell really good," he uttered as her cheeks turned a light shade of pink, his nose nuzzled into her neck. Bakatbane," she muttered, making him chuckle at hearing her verbal tick. Kushina however gasped when he began to place butterfly kisses on her smooth neck while she tilted her head back to give him more access. "I will mark you as mine, Ka-san." He grinned lightly against her skin before biting slightly on it. "Ah, Naruto," she moaned as he nipped on her skin with his lower lip, suckling and chewing on it gently while Kushina squirmed under his ministrations. "Naruto. Keep doing it." she moaned, biting her index finger as he gave her a hickey. There, he declared before kissing the spot, lightly making her giggle a bit. Kushina smiled lightly as she touched the small hickey on her side neck. His mark. Naruko's mark. I'm his now. My baby, she thought fondly before gaining a mischievous glint in her eyes. Whoa. Dada. The blonde exclaimed in surprise when she flipped him over easily, showing why she was a cage-level kunoichi. Naruto winced, feeling extreme pain as Kushina sat on him with a sly grin. Ha. Now it's my too. Naruto, she asked in concern upon seeing his pained expression as the blonde laid under her with Kushina sitting on his stomach. Ah hey. It's nothing, he verbalized with a pained smile. Be careful Naruto-kun, your injuries are still fresh. And with your body not being able to currently handle much of my chakra, it may take a day or two to heal you, came Ayumi's concerned voice. Kushina however narrowed her eyes upon seeing his pained expression. Ka-san. He stammered as she gently began to unbutton his shirt, a serious expression on her face. Naruto averted his gaze as he heard her gasp lightly. Kushina gently traced her right hand over his bandaged upper body, her eyes getting glossy. How did this happen? She asked in concern, making him sigh. Well, I did fight one-on-one against an S-rank criminal. I was lucky to even manage out a draw, he uttered seriously while she just stayed quiet. Snaking his hands to hold hers, he gently pulled her over him to grin lightly. There's something I wanted to say, he murmured, their faces inches apart as she stared at him in confusion. Parting a bang to behind her ear, the blonde kissed her cute nose lightly, a warm smile on his face. Arigato. Kushina. Her eyes widened as he chuckled at her. For what? She questioned as he shifted his gaze to outside the window, staring at the full moon with a serene expression on his face. Kushina watched him with a small smile as she cupped his cheeks tenderly. He looks so happy, so at peace. I'm glad you haven't changed. Naruto. It was because of you that I'm alive today, the blonde started, catching her attention as he kept staring at the moon. During the whole month, I kept trying to avoid some of your training, where you just beat me into a bloody pulp and asked me to dodge your attacks. Even though I didn't show it on the outside, I was a little bit angry with you, he confessed, not watching her face as she gasped inaudibly in surprise. He was angry at me. Kushina thought in surprise, not liking this revelation in the least, but still. She continued to listen. There were times I was down, times when I was really angry with you. I was like, isn't it enough that villagers beat me in the past, that Sakura-chan used to beat me, and now my own mother. Did people just kept finding excuses to shit on me? Naruto, no. It was nothing like that, you know how much I love you. I would never. I know Ka-san. He turned his eyes to gaze back at her, a timid sort of smile on his face as he wiped a stray tear off her cheek. I was immature back then, not being able to see what was right in front of me, and wrong in front of me, the Jinchuriki muttered with sad look in his eyes while Kushina shook her head in denial. No, you were no. I knew how much it hurt you to beat me like that. Every punch on me was like a stab to your own heart. Every drop of my blood led to a drop of your own tear. Now I understand how much it hurt you. He paused while she had her eyes widened in surprise. Naruto smiled as he played with the tresses of her hair. I'm sorry for not understanding you earlier. But now I see that you were just aiming for what was best for me to survive against Akatsuki. It was because of your harsh training that I could stand against an enemy like Deidara. You know, even he asked me as to who my trainer was. Right then I knew how right you were. Just like a parent, you were going for what was best for me, and just like a child, I couldn't understand my parent. You were doing what a father would have done, and then later, fussing all over my injured self, just like a mother. You were daughter playing both the role of a father and mother. You try your best to be my mom, my dad, my sister, my best friend, and most of all, you are my lover. So many responsibilities, with no one to support you, even with me sometimes not being with you, you never wavered. No parent is ideal, of course, but you tried your best to shower me with love, even protecting me from civilian girls who flirted with me. Hee hee. It was funny, but actually heartwarming to see you so possessive of me, both as my mother and lover. In just a month, you made me feel what's it like to have parents. I think you're an amazing person, Kushina-chan. He spoke with sincerity, staring at the shocked look in her eyes with a sheepish smile. Kushina was currently biting her lower lip, tears freely flowing down her cheeks as he wiped them with his hands. Thank you. For letting me be your son. A choked sob escaped her lips as she closed her eyes while he continued to smile at her, knowing that those were tears of happiness. My baby, she exclaimed before engulfing him in a protective hug, her arms around his head which was pushed into her cleavage. More sobs escaped her lips as she clutched him tightly to her. Parents usually told their children that they were proud of them, but for their own children to declare that they were proud of them, it was a heavenly feeling, like the reason for their living, for them being alive was successful. Kushina couldn't describe it, but she felt like the happiest being alive on the planet. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. She repeatedly exclaimed while his head was pressed into her cleavage, clutching her object of affection tightly, not wanting to let him go, ever. Thank you. For letting me being your mother, sweetheart, she whispered with a sniff. When her eyes opened wide in surprise, a dark blush spreading across her cheeks. Naruto. She spoke softly, a pleasurable sigh escaping her lips as he kneaded her voluptuous breasts through her kimono. The blonde had a mischievous grin on his face as he sniffed in the scent from her cleavage, getting intoxicated by it. My, I can feel your hard nipples, Kushi-chan, why so turned on? He asked slyly as she moaned when his thumb grazed against her nipples. It had been a week since he had tended to her, since he drank her milk, and they had started to hurt since the past couple of days. Her breasts were really sensitive right now. Naru, too. She couldn't say anything as he continued to play with her tits, before parting the edges of her kimono to reveal her voluptuous mounds. Kushina supported herself on her elbows as he started to grope her double D cups, a thirsty look on his face. Ha! Oh Naruto. Suck them. Please, she moaned loudly, making him smirk. Time for my midnight snack, he mumbled before licking her right nipple, sucking on them a bit roughly while her moans got even louder, reverberating through the room. Oh, Naru. Her moans were so sweet, so melodic as well as lustful as he drank her sprays of baby milk, sucking on them eagerly while playing with her other tit with his hands. He deliberately continued to make lewd noises, turning on Kushina even more as she struggled to support herself. Now for the next one. Leaving her nipple with an audible pop, he turned to her left nipple, sucking and biting on it roughly while Kushina's loud moans could be heard throughout the apartment. Yes, harder. On Naru koi, so good. She hung her head, her bangs covering her face as her body shook in an orgasm while Naruto stopped, his eyes wide. Did you just come? He asked, slipping his head out from in between her breasts while she nodded lightly, still panting. She couldn't help herself, it had felt so good. The blonde, however, grinned foxily as he licked his lips. It was delicious, he exclaimed while she giggled lightly. Releasing a dreamy sigh, she fell to his side. Naruto stared at her, parting a strand of hair out of her eye as she smiled at him. I guess we can't do it tonight, huh? A cute pout on her face, her cheeks a light shade of red while he blinked in confusion. Do what? Her blush darkened as the redhead averted her gaze. Well. You know, making love, her cheeks now tomato red when he burst out laughing. Kushina glared at him playfully as she puffed her cheeks with a pout. Ha ha ha. Okay Kushina, you're still so shy. She averted her gaze, an annoyed look on her face while he snickered to himself. Poof. That's right, you're so naive Kushina, Ayumi's grinning face from other side of Naruto, her chin resting on his shoulder as she waved at her ex-Jinchuriki. Kushina gasped upon seeing Ayumi's grinning face as she glared at the biju. It's your damn fault. You're the one who spoiled my Naruto. She exclaimed, now reaching for her neck when Ayumi leaned back to her side. Hey whoa. Naruto spoke when Kushina got over him as she tried to reach for Ayumi's neck. Itai Kai-san. Naruto yelled while Kushina kept trying to reach for Ayumi's neck, wanting to strangle the biju. A mischievous grin took birth on Ayumi's face when Mawa. Kushina yelled in pain. Wham. Itai. Elbowing Naruto in the gut on impulse as he screamed comically in pain while Kushina tried to free her index and middle finger which Ayumi had bitten. The Biju exhaled as she let Kushina's hand go. Both Uzumaki continued to writhe in pain as they clutched their respective injured parts. Ow ow ow. It hurts Dadbao, Dadbane. Both of them whined, Kushina sucking on her swollen fingers, trying to ease the pain while the blonde was holding his bandaged stomach. Oh Naruto-kun, are you okay? Ayumi purred in her sweet voice as she scooted closer to him, rubbing his stomach when she licked his whiskered cheek sensually. Naruto shuddered in a small spark of pleasure. He could also feel her voluptuous breasts pressed to his right arm as she slowly grinded her body against him. Not now Ayumi-chan, he groaned as she smiled at him seductively. Why not, Koi? She asked, licking his earlobe making him shudder as her hand slowly went down his stomach. Hey, don't do that. He's injured right now, Kushina exclaimed with a frown, a vein popping on her forehead. The damn vixen had the gall to seduce her son-lover in front of her. Ayumi pouted cutely as she just settled for snuggling by Naruto's side when Kushina pointed an accusing finger at her. And don't you dare bite my fingers ever again, Ayumi Baka. The Biju again got a gleam in her eyes as she bit on. Accusing finger, again. Wah! Kushina screamed in pain while Naruto sighed. Why do these two act like children around each other? He thought with a sweat drop when due to her writhing, her knee slammed into his balls of glory, leading to his eyes rolling back into his head. Fuakakebao. A scream was heard throughout the village. An hour later. Thank Kami, these two are finally asleep, Naruto thought in relief, currently staring at the ceiling with Ayumi and Kushina snuggled up to both of his sides, sleeping soundly with small smiles on their faces. He turned his head upon hearing Kushina whimper lightly in her sleep as she tightened her hold on him. Naruto. Salt ramen is better. No, a cute pout on face as she nuzzled her nose into his neck. He chuckled before kissing her forehead lightly as her smile widened in her sleep. Yes, suck them harder, Naruto Koi. He sweat dropped when Ayumi moaned in her sleep, a light blush on his cheeks. Turning his head to the other side, his eyes softened at the adorable look on her face. She looks so innocent when sleeping. He thought before kissing her forehead tenderly as she hemmed in sleep, her smile widening a bit. A realization, however, suddenly hit him, his eyes widening a bit. That's right, I was supposed to meet Yuga-chan. She's on patrol duty tonight, he mused with a small smile, his arms holding both the redheads closely to him. Wow, is this heaven or what? A silly grin on the Jinchuriki's face as both Kushina and Ayumi snuggled into his neck, content expressions on their faces. Forming a seal-less shadow clone, he substituted with it. Ah, damn, I need to recover quickly and get back to training, he thought with a sigh, stretching his muscles lightly while wincing at the bolts of pain that coursed through his body. The blonde gazed at Ayumi and Kushina with a smile as they snuggled into his clone. Getting rid of his civilian clothes, Naruto got into his dark blue sweatshirt and shinobi pants. Entering the bathroom attached to the bedroom, he washed his face somewhat lazily. Gazing into the mirror, he stared at his image with a serious expression, having a lost look in his eyes. That's why, Naruto-kun, no matter how strong you get physically, as a shinobi, you will always be weak. A sigh escaped his lips as he gripped the sides of the sink, the blonde now lowering his head. I'm not weak, damn it. Stop acting like you know everything, he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible. A low chuckle escaped his lips as he remembered how he'd pulled out a draw against Deidara by using his sexy jutsu. Hey, you have no idea how unpredictable I am, Naruto thought with a smirk on his face as he stared at his image, his rinnegan flashing for a second with a burst of chakra. Konoha. Patrol border around West Gate. The moon's full tonight, one purple-haired Anbu thought with a small smile as she gazed at the moon, sitting on the edge of the large border wall. Her mask was laying beside her along with her katana as her purple-violet hair flowed with the light breeze. Her legs were hanging by the edge of the wall, her hands in her lap as she found herself lost in the full glowing moon. It really gave her a sense of peace whenever she watched the moon, especially a full one. It was one of her favorite hobbies. Several nights she would fall asleep in her bed while staring into the glowing heavenly body. Closing her eyes, she sighed lightly. I hope he's okay now, she pondered with a somewhat melancholic look in her chocolate brown orbs as she grazed the hilt of her katana, her Anbu gloves laying on her lap. Her eyes saddened even more as she stared at her lap. The last time she had talked with him was during the invasions, when she had broken down in front of him. She hated herself for it. She was not supposed to make him feel bad. He had already suffered enough in his life, and she was just complicating matters because of her stupid loneliness and jealousy. She hated this childishness of hers. She was the most matured one amongst the Fire Queens, and the way she had broken in front of him, was just frustrating. Even though he had told her that he loved her, she still didn't want to be a burden to him. She might be somewhat pessimistic, but sometimes it's the pessimism that leads to optimistic things in your life. It's better to be cautious and wary rather than bearing the pain later, she thought with a small smile, her orbs reflecting the illumination. Her eyes widened as she grabbed her katana in a blur before posing it at the neck of the one trying to sneak behind her. Whoa, whoa. Her breathing hitched in shock as her hand, which was holding the katana, somewhat quivered against the skin of his neck. Naruto-kun. She couldn't believe it. He was standing there with a nervous grin on his face. He. Sorry for sneaking like that. Could you remove this thing? He asked sheepishly, making her snap out of her trance-like state. Sorry, she stuttered, whipping her katana back as she sheathed it. Naruto smiled at her warmly as she stood up somewhat nervously. I didn't know you were back, she murmured in a low tone, gazing somewhat shyly at the concrete she was standing on. Her eyes widened when two strong arms wrapped around her frame. You're nervous, Naruto whispered with a chuckle, hugging her form to him while she wrapped her arms around his waist, her face snuggled into his chest. How are you? She asked softly as he sniffed in her hair, playing with the wisps of her hair gently while Yuga concentrated on his rhythmic heartbeats, feeling herself at peace. I'm fine. Yep. Don't worry. I'm fine. It's you who I'm worried about, he uttered softly before leaning back, surprising her somewhat. He watched her face, mesmerized by her beauty while she too stared into his eyes, his oceanic blue orbs enchanting her as always. I'm sorry, he whispered with a sad smile, now cupping her right cheek when she put her hand over his, shaking her head while her eyes were glossy. Don't be, please, her eyes slowly closed as she wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him in. Naruto didn't resist, the moonlight reflecting off her face giving her an unearthly glow as he grazed his thumb over her soft milky skin. She moaned immediately when their lips met, kissing him gently while he too returned the gesture. The blonde snaked his arms around her waist, pulling her in while she deepened the kiss, her hands sifting through his spiky locks. Damn, her lips are amazingly soft, he thought, pleasure tingling through his body while Yugao's heart was hammering against her chest. He took a step back when she further deepened the kiss, her hands fisting his Junin vest as the Kenjutsu mistress began to kiss him hungrily. Soon they were involved in a battle of tongues while Yugao's knees began to buckle a bit. Naruto tightened his hold on her waist, pouring his feelings into the kiss as she moaned loudly, immensely enjoying the kiss. This had always been her dream, to kiss him under the full moon. Leaning back, both of them panted heavily as they stared at each other with love evident in their eyes. Yugao had a light blush on her cheeks as she panted against his neck, clutching him tightly to her. So, what were you doing? I don't think sitting like that while on patrol duty is good for the security of our village, Yugao-chan. He teased with a light grin while she leaned back, pouting at him playfully. Well, an embarrassed blush took birth on her face as she turned her head sideways, her index finger against her lips as an act of nervousness. Naruto raised an amused eyebrow at her as he took hold of her chin gently before making her look at him. Nay, what is it, Yugao-chan? He asked with a smile, her eyes shimmering in the moonlight. I was watching the moon, she spoke in a low tone, her cheeks lit in an embarrassed blush while he chuckled. Leaning forward, he caught her lips in a chaste kiss, drowning all her nervousness away. Tilting back, he smiled at her before taking her in a tight hug. That's a great hobby, Yugao-chan. Let's watch it together then, he whispered with a grin while her body stiffened in shock. What? She stuttered, making him laugh lightly. Guiding her, they both sat down beside her laying gear while Yugao felt like this was a dream. It's beautiful, isn't it? Naruto verbalized with a smile, staring at the glowing star while she stared at him with wide eyes. What? Why do you look so surprised? He asked in amusement after averting his gaze, making her snap her head back, her cheeks red in embarrassment as she too stared at the moon. A comfortable silence ensued between the two. I always found it fascinating. He turned his head to look at her while she kept staring above into the sky with a glowing smile on her face. Well, it does suits you, Moonflower-chan, he grinned, making her nod at the meaning of her name. Yeah, it was an intended pun by my parents. The moon was full on the day I was born, she said with a somewhat sad smile before perking up as she pointed towards the moon. See those dim dark patches on it? It reminds me of yin-yang, the positive and negative aspects of life, she articulated with a bright smile as he gazed back at the moon, nodding with her. It just shows that not even the moon is all bright, it too can't reflect all the brightness of the stars, that it has darkness too. But the fact that it still shines over the whole world despite that darkness is what makes it truly great. Naruto stared at Yuga with something akin to awe, and admiration. Her smile right then was contagious, that smile on her face, that bright and glowing smile as she gazed at the moon, it was magical. And to tell the truth, he was stunned. And the way it shines through those foggy clouds is even more captivating. She was like a giddy school girl, practically jumping in excitement. It acts like a slightly opaque curtain, giving it a mystical appearance, don't you think, Naruto? She cheered before turning towards him to find him just staring at her. What? Her smile gave way to a sheepish grin as he smiled at her softly. Yuga-chan, he muttered, making her look at him in curiosity. Snaking his right hand to around her left shoulder, he pulled her closer to him gently. You're wonderful, he grinned lightly, making her blush crimson red as she tried to hide her face. Turning his orbs back towards the moon, he smiled serenely. Yes, it truly is a mesmerizing sight. It makes you at peace, he muttered while she rested her head on his shoulder, sighing in content. Please don't let this be a dream, please don't, she prayed, trying to drown herself in his warmth. Watching the moon, sitting with him like this in the middle of the night, was her fantasy, it had always been her dream. She thought that he might laugh at her, even the other fire queens thought that gazing at the moon was boring. But here he was, appreciating her for it. She felt like she had died and gone to heaven, now sitting in his arms like this. It really does makes you forget all your problems, like you don't have to worry about anything. She lifted her head to watch his face, his infectious smile while he seemed to be in a reverie. Yuga smiled at him lovingly, he really was amazing. Are you? She trailed as she cupped his cheek, making him look at her. Are you okay, Naruto-kun? A worried look in her eyes, knowing what he went through with Itachi just a week ago. Naruto smiled at her warmly as he kissed her palm softly, clutching her tightly to him. As long as I have you by my side like this, I'll be okay. A lone tear escaped Yugao's chocolate brown orbs as she took hold of his right hand. I'll be forever by your side, you don't have to worry about me leaving. Her voice quivered at the end, determination visible in her eyes. I'll be your glowing star, I'll reflect upon you as much brightness as I can, I will make you glow. And you will be my glowing full moon, someone who I can always watch and love, she verbalized, making his eyes widen at her before they softened. Thank you, Yuga-chan, I love you, he spoke softly, kissing her on the cheek, making her smile lovingly at him. I love you too, she muttered when they heard a loud groan, making her blush. Hey, are you hungry? Naruto asked her with an amused look on his face while she blushed profusely, shaking her head. And no, that must be some animal or something, she stuttered, making him roll his eyes, along with inwardly exclaiming at how cute she looked when flustered. Standing up, he went through a couple of hand seals before putting his index finger on the right side of his chest. Kai, he muttered as a medium-sized scroll popped out. Setting it on the concrete floor, he opened it to reveal several squares. Most of them were pitch black while some of them were white. Putting his index finger on a black square.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.